both talked about community. Can you speak a little bit about how you brought in the community aspect to these new books and why that was important?
Oh, sure. Here, we could just, pass back
Just
and
pass
forth.
it, yeah.
Yeah, well, so I guess the idea of bringing community into Furious started out a little superficially because we were like, well, if we've got a heist, not a big guys, but if we've got a heist, we need a squad. So we need like this person, we need the lookout, the this, and so we had to bring friends into the equation. But what it ended up being is this collection of kids in this smaller southern town, which is where my co-author grew up in a town like that. Many of them like queer at all different stages of their identities and relationships, and obviously tapping into the Fast and Furious, which Jamie and I are both big fans of, like the value of family and the found family, which is big to, I guess, car people and also big to queer people. That's something we have in common. And it just became like a wonderful mechanism for giving our characters like support and getting them out of their head and again like out of their grief cycles and just starting to open themselves up a little more to being supported and to being loved and to recognizing and like valuing the relationships around that. And so I guess that's the role that it plays in my book.
Sure, I think it's a little bit different in middle grade because my main character can't drive.
Yeah.
So how do 12-year-olds, how do 13-year-olds find community when their families aren't necessarily accepting of them being queer, and trying to write that into a book? It's supposed to be a guide for kids who might be going through this themselves, but also for adults just to model how to be a trusted adult to queer kids, because I think we often tell kids to talk to trusted adults and like find the trusted adults, but no one ever talks to the trusted adults about how it's supposed to play that role.
Fantastic point. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think community is so important to me, especially like, as a queer person. Like my found family, my chosen family were always the ones who showed up for me and like made me feel loved and accepted. And I wanted to put that into a book to kind of just affirm kids who might be having a hard time, but parents who might be having a hard time with queerness because of big personal ideals. So Murray has an older brother who left the family 2 years before the book starts because he comes out to their parents. So Murray is harboring the very early stages of figuring out who she is in terms of queerness, in terms of gender. She doesn't really have the language yet to describe, but I really wanted to explore what queerness means beyond that, in terms of finding people who understand you, who see you, or from you, regardless of what label you use, or kind of without letting their beliefs kind of interrupt their acceptance of you as a person.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Follow-up question. No, I love what you said about like modeling for adults how to be that safe person for kids, because we kind of overlook that a lot of the times. And it's also a big conversation we have in Kidlit, is like keeping in mind the audience we're writing for and like the audience we're serving. But you make such a good point, because there are going to be like adults reading these books with their kids, there's going to be adults teaching these books. And so how did you find a way to balance like having that model in there while still speaking primarily to like the people who the book was for, which was like your middle grade audience?
I think for me, I love building character in books. That's one of my favorite things. And kind of Murray is my number one, like definitely prioritizing her emotional arc, but just as like the adult like, writer, like being in that like overview perspective, thinking about everyone's own personal journey and like why they might say different things they do. So Murray stays with an aunt and uncle who were previously really accepting and kind of took in her older brother, which caused the conflict between them and her parents. So they really have no choice but to stay with them because the hurricane comes. So it's a very kind of twist of like forced proximity situation where like what forces these people who wouldn't otherwise spend time together and then letting that play out. But her aunt and uncle, you kind of see them because Murray eavesdrops on them in the hallway. And she catches like snippets of their conversations of like, they're trying to figure out like, how do they support Murray? They know that her parents are very defensive about being the parents and being in control of like how they talk to her. But kind of them trying to like battle out like, what can we do? How can we support her? Like, where are the limits of that? And then also just being glad that she has older teens in her life. So it's really like a 3-generation thing where you have the adults, you have the older teens, and then you have the tween characters in my book too. And I also just wanted that so that tweens could both read up to like aspire to the teen characters, and then also for the adults to kind of see that gradient between the different age groups in the book as well.
Oh, I love that.